Denmark has a diverse, mixed economy. It relies heavily on human resources, but not exclusively, as there are a few significant and valuable natural resources available, including mature oil and gas wells in the North Sea. Cooperatives form a large part of some sectors, be it in housing, agriculture or retail. Foundations play a large role as owners of private sector companies. Denmark's nominal GDP was estimated to be $333,238 million, the 32nd largest in the world. It has the world's lowest level of income inequality, according to the World Bank Gini, but no legally stipulated minimum wage. As of January 2015, the unemployment rate is at 6.2%, which is below the euro area average of 11.2%. As of 28 February 2014, Denmark is among the countries with the highest credit rating. Denmark's main exports are industrial production, manufactured goods 73.3%, agricultural products and others for consumption 18.7%. Denmark is a net exporter of food and energy and has since the 1990s had a balance of payments surplus. The accumulated value of service and merchandise exports in 2013 amounted to 54% of GDP, and imports in 2013 amounted to 49% of GDP. Notable among the service exports are container shipping. There is no net foreign debt as other countries owe more money to Denmark than Denmark owes to them. But because of large deficits due to increased unemployment levels, the central government has increased its debt level since the end of September 2008, when it stood at 21% of GDP, according to the central bank, in accordance with the Eurostat EMU gross debt numbers, which only take liabilities into account. Taking assets into account as well, net debt of the central government was 11%. The public sector as a whole had net assets of 108 billion kroner in 2008. Within the European Union, Denmark advocates a liberal trade policy. Its standard of living is average among the Western European countries, and for many years the most equally distributed as shown by the Gini coefficient in the world. And the Danes devote 0.8% of gross national income to foreign aid. It is a society based on consensus with the Danish Confederation of Trade Unions and the Confederation of Danish Employers in 1899 in September, for legit recognizing each other's right to organize, thus, negotiate. The employer's right to hire and fire their employees whenever they find it necessary is recognized. There is no official minimum wage set by the government. The minimum of wages is determined by negotiations between the organizations of employers and employees. Denmark produces oil, natural gas, wind and bioenergy. Its principal exports are machinery, instruments and food products. The US is Denmark's largest non-European trading partner, accounting for around 5% of total Danish merchandise trade. Aircraft, computers, machinery, and instruments are among the major US exports to Denmark. Among major Danish exports to the US are industrial machinery, chemical products, furniture, pharmaceuticals, Lego and canned ham and pork. Overview. This thoroughly modern market economy features high-tech agriculture, up-to-date small-scale and corporate industry, extensive government welfare measures, comfortable living standards, and high dependence on foreign trade. Denmark is a net exporter of food. The centre-left coalition government concentrated on reducing the unemployment rate and turning the budget deficit into a surplus, as well as following the previous government's policies of maintaining low inflation and a current account surplus. The coalition also committed itself to maintaining a stable currency. The coalition lowered marginal income tax rates while maintaining overall tax revenues, boosted industrial competitiveness through labor market and tax reforms, increased research and development funds, The availability and duration of unemployment benefit has been restricted to 4 years, and because of rapidly rising prices on housing, this has led to an increase in poverty from below 4% in 1995 to 5% in 2006, according to the Danish Economic Council. Despite these cuts, the part of the public sector in Denmark which buys goods and services from the private sector and provides a public sector administration and direct service to the public nursing institutions for the young or old, hospitals, schools, police, and so on, has risen from 25.5% of GDP during the former government to 26% today, and is projected to be at 26.5% in 2015 if current policies continue. Denmark chose not to join the 11 other European Union members who launched the euro on 1 January 1999, especially from 2006. Economists and political pundits have expressed concern that the lack of skilled labor will result in higher pay increases and an overheating of the economy, which would repeat the boom-and-bust cycle in 1986, when government introduced a tax reform and restricted the private loan market because of a record balance of payments deficit. As a consequence, the trade balance showed a surplus in 1987, and the balance of payments in 1990. They have remained in surplus since, except for the balance of payments in 1998. Welfare state. Denmark has a broad-reaching welfare system, which ensures that all Danes receive tax-funded healthcare. Expenses to medicine is only partially funded, and some non-vital medical treatments are not funded at all. Denmark has an unemployment insurance system called the A-Kasse. This system requires a paying membership of a state-recognized unemployment fund. Most of these funds are managed by trade unions, and a high percentage of their expenses are financed through the state tax system. Members of an A-Kasse are not obliged to be members of a trade union. Not every Danish citizen or employee qualifies for a membership of an unemployment fund, and membership benefits will be terminated after 2 or more years of unemployment. A person that is not member of an A-Kasse cannot receive unemployment benefits. Unemployment funds does not pay benefits to sick members. They will be transferred to a municipal social support system instead. Denmark has a countrywide, but municipal-administered social support system against poverty, securing that qualified citizens has a minimum income of living. All Danish citizens above 18 years of age can apply for some financial support, if they cannot sustain themselves or their family. Approval is by no means automatic, and the extent of this system has generally been diminished over the last 30 years. After a newly implemented reform by 5 January 2015, sick people can receive some financial support throughout the extent of their illness, and not just for the maximum of 1 year as previously. Their ability to work will be re-evaluated by the municipality after 5 months of illness. Denmark ranked the first in the European Pensions Barometer survey for the past 2 years. The lowest income group before retirement from the age of 65 receive 120% of their pre-retirement income in pension and miscellaneous subsidies. The world's largest public sector is financed by the world's highest taxes. A value-added tax of 25% is levied on the sale of most goods and services. The income tax in Denmark ranges from 37.4% to 63% progressively, levied on 4 out of 10 full-time employees. Such high rates meant that 1,010,000 Danes before the end of 2008 were paying a marginal income tax of 63% and a combined marginal tax of 70.9%, resulting in warnings from organizations such as the OECD. TV2 reported in April 2008 that abolishing the middle and top-level income tax brackets would amount to 2 and 1% of public sector revenue. respectively, which equals 1.5% of GDP. The public sector as a whole had a budget surplus of 4.4% of GDP in 2007, but the tax cuts would increase private consumption and the labor shortage, thus resulting in a deficit on the trade balance and pressure to increase wages even further. Proceeds from selling one's home are not taxed, as the marginal tax rate on capital income from housing savings is around 0%. A survey by Standard & Poor's found that the total debt secured by mortgages in Danish homes amounts to 89.8% of GDP, which is above the debt level in other EU countries. Political agendas for increasing the labor supply has resulted in several reforms and financial cuts. Reforms were initiated with the abolishing of the labor market arrangement called Efterløn, at the present with more than 130,000 participants. Participation in this scheme was also open for self-employed people. Several reforms of the rights of the unemployed has followed up, partially inspired by the Danish Economic Council. Halving the time unemployment benefits can be received from 4 to 2 years and making it twice as hard to regain this right has recently been implemented. For example, this particular reform resulted in more than 50,000 unemployed people dropping out of the social benefit system within the first year, and the majority were not qualified for the municipal-administered social support system either. This situation has caused a lot of debate and political conflict in Denmark in recent years. The cabinets of Helle Thorning-Schmidt attempted several short-term solutions, but there were no political mandate to roll back the reforms. From 2015, a large majority of the population and a newfound broad political alliance now suggests a partial rollback, but nothing has been effectuated yet. Taxation and employment. Taxation with a GDP of 1,642,215 million Danish kroner and revenue from taxes and ownership at 803,693 million Danish kroner, 49.07% of GDP. It is of extreme importance what happens in the tax-financed part of the economy. According to newly revised statistics, Denmark had the world's highest tax level in 2005 and 2006, when tax revenue collected amounted to 50.7% and 49.1% of GDP respectively, and also held this position 1970–74 and 1993–95. These figures do not include income from ownership. In 2013, the combined tax revenues collected amounted to 47.9% of GDP. Budgets. The overall surpluses after operating and capital expenditure in the whole public sector for the years 2004 to 2008. 27,327, 77,362, 79,937, 75,560, 69,140. The public sector debt liabilities still outstanding 1 January 2008 in accordance with the Eurostat EMU debt numbers are 440.9 billion Danish kroner. In spite of falling surpluses, this debt is expected to fall until 2015. As of 2008, there is no net debt in the public sector as a whole, but instead net assets of 43 billion Danish kroner. The central government is determined to pay off the debt as fast as possible, avoiding the temptation to increase spending which might overheat the economy because of a short supply of skilled labor and in the end require financial austerity measures to cool off the economy. Reporting on the record low unemployment numbers of under 50,000 persons in April 2008, published 9:30 a.m. the 29th of May by Statistics Denmark, TV2, at 10 p.m., with comments from Nordea Bank's chief economist Helga Pedersen, and DR2, at 10:30 p.m., stressed the danger of overheating the economy and keeping public sector spending in check or otherwise risk economical political measures. Being surprised at how low unemployment was, the economist said that compared with previous periods with such a low unemployment rate, a trade deficit was avoided mainly because of the oil export. The EMU gross debt was 730 billion Danish kroner at the end of 1993, 80.1% of GDP. During the four-year period 2004 to 2007, the public sector EMU gross debt fell from 43.8% to 26.0% of GDP. The budget surpluses were 1.9%, 5.0%, 4.8%, and 4.4% of GDP, respectively. Employment. Public sector employment has been relatively steady at more than 800,000 a year this first decade, making up around 38% of total full-time employment, whereas private sector employment has risen by over 300,000 since the 1990s to slightly over 2 million in 2007, with the information based partly on payments to the Arbejdsmarkedstillægspension pension fund of all employees and insured but unemployed members of an unemployment fund in Denmark. Full-time employment is calculated at over 2.3 million persons in the third quarter of 2007. The share of employees leaving jobs every year in the private sector is around 30%, a more than 300,000 level also observed in the UK and US but much higher than in continental Europe, where the corresponding figure is around 10%, and in Sweden. This attrition can be very costly, with new and old employees requiring half a year to return to old productivity levels, but with attrition bringing the number of people that have to be fired down. Productivity increased at an average of 2.3% a year in 2004, 2005 and 2006. Recently being revised upward from an average of just 0.9% and previously with a too high employment level estimated. The upward revision is good, because a high-wage economy like Denmark's with very few valuable natural resources needs to be highly productive, or efficient, and innovative to compete with other countries for a market share in the global economy. However, according to OECD, the distortions imposed by a combined marginal tax wedge of 70% are hurting productivity and in turn the country's competitiveness.